While the F1 teams had been beavering away over the winter, Britain had got a new TV channel, with the launch of Channel 4, whose first programme was the word game Countdown, which is still running in 2021. Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev died after 18 years in power, and was succeeded by former KGB head Yuri Andropov, who had been instrumental in suppressing the 1956 Hungarian uprising, but had counselled against intervening in Poland in 1981, so Western observers were a little bit nervous but not dreading his premiership. ABBA made what would be their final public appearance on The Late Late Breakfast Show.
And the papers recently have been full of stories that you're going to split eventually. You're not, no.
The band never formally split, but its members had started working on other solo projects, including the musical Chess, and their final single Under Attack had been disappointing in the charts. Also ending was MASH, whose final episode, Goodbye, Farewell and Amen, airing on the 28th of February, became the most watched programme in US history, with a total audience of 121.6 million, beating the previous record, the Who Shot JR episode of Dallas. The record would stand until the 2010 Super Bowl. With the usual January trip to South Africa postponed, the teams met up in mid-March in Nelson Piquet's hometown of Rio de Janeiro to kick off the 1983 season, amid intense interest and speculation as to the pace of the new breed of F1 cars. The wing car era of ground effects cars was over, and there was anticipation to see how the various designers had solved the resultant problems. Testing times had shown that the odd-looking Toleman TG183B was faster than it looked, though some thought its unusual double rear wing might fall foul of the scrutineers, while predictions of the demise of normally aspirated engines seemed to be borne out by Williams's poor testing times. The acid test would be the race weekend, though. As Renault had so amply proved in 1982, speed is worth nothing if the cars don't finish. Andrea de Cesaris was the first man eliminated from the weekend, falling foul of the new zero-tolerance rule on weight checks. A new system of random weight checks was introduced, and Andrea elected to finish his flying lap when called in, only to be summarily disqualified from the event, his misfortune to be the warning for everyone else. With just 28 cars entered, there was no need for pre-qualifying, and there were a few jaws on the floor when Keke Rosberg began his title defence by putting the FW08C on pole. It seemed that Williams had been doing a bit of sandbagging over the winter, running with full tanks and hard tyres to disguise their true performance. More expected were Prost, Tombe and Piquet in second, third and fourth. Derek Warwick also turned a few heads by putting his Toleman fifth, though such had been the team's pace in testing that some in the team actually looked mildly disappointed not to be higher. Arnoux began his Ferrari career in sixth, alongside Patrese. Cheever started his first Renault race 8th, and Lauda was 9th, sporting a helmet with reversed colours from last year, now primarily red, the better to distinguish it from Watson's. With De Cesaris' exclusion, 27 cars were vying for 26 places, and the odd man out was Piercarlo Gonzani, meaning that the three new boys, Cecotto 19th, Sullivan 21st and Fabi 24th, all made the race. Fully half the grid had beaten Piquet's 1982 pole time, Rosberg by 2 seconds, so clearly the designers had been earning their keep. The scrutineers didn't bat an eyelid at the Toleman rear wing, and the Ligier team promptly fitted their own version for race day. The drivers got ready for the lights to go green under cloudy skies, a godsend after astronomical temperatures so far in the weekend. Elio De Angelis suffered a turbo failure on the way round to the grid, and his car was pushed off, and he took to the spare Ford-powered car to start from the pit lane. The first start of the new era was clean enough, and Rosberg began to stave off Prost to hold on to the lead and soon began pulling away from the fully fuelled Renault. By the end of the lap, the gap was already 2.5 seconds, and the Brabhams of Piquet and Patrese were itching to get past and set off in pursuit. Next came the Ferraris, Cheever's second Renault, Warwick now down to 8th, Baldi, Lauda and Watson, who'd got past 5 cars already. On lap 2, Piquet got a tow and took second, pulling away immediately, and Patrese followed suit further round and likewise began to establish a gap back to Prost. Piquet was flying and brought the 2.5 second gap to Rosberg down to nothing by lap 7, while further back Watson was likewise charging, passing Lauda, Baldi, Warwick and Cheever all off camera. To the roar of the Brazilian crowd, Piquet passed Rosberg in a carbon copy of his move on Prost and took the lead of his home race. The Brabhams were truly flying, and Rosberg soon came under pressure from Patrese, while Piquet cleared off into the distance. Michele Alboreto, meanwhile, became the first retirement of the new season on lap 6, after a tangle with Baldi on the first lap had spun the Tyrrell round and damaged the oil cooler beyond repair. A still flying Watson made it up to 5th behind Prost, while Cheever was leading a small parade including Jarier, Lauda, Thieir and the Theodore twins. As the laps went on, it became obvious that something was wrong with Patrese' car. He was unable to make much impression on Rosberg and then started dropping back, losing places to Prost and Watson, and by lap 18 he was 9th. Watson, meanwhile, was still moving up, now past Prost and 3rd thanks to Patrese's troubles. Giacomelli didn't endear himself to his new boss, Alex Hawkridge, by spinning his Tolman off on lap 17. Corrado Fabi had an engine failure the lap after, and the same lap Patrese pulled in to have his engine looked at. A broken exhaust meant nothing could be done, and after one further exploratory lap, he retired. So, it was Piquet, Rosberg, Watson, Prost, Tombe and Baldi in the top 6, with Warwick 7th and trying to get past the Alpha as Lauda bore down on the Tolman in turn. Unseen by the cameras, Warwick let Lauda through to have a go at Baldi, then tried to follow through, only to clip the back of the Alpha and push it into a spin. The marshals gave Marrow a shove to send him on his way, but he'd damaged his suspension in the incident and merely limped round to retire. Warwick was able to continue, but quickly dropped behind Lauda. On lap 18, Rosberg peeled in for his planned pit stop, but when the team pulled the fuel hose out, a couple of stray drops splashed onto the engine cover and flashed over. The fire lasted less than a second, but Rosberg was already out of his cockpit. Some gesturing later, realising that the fire wasn't a problem, he hopped back in, the team hastily strapped him in, restarted the engine, gave him a shove, and he was back underway. Lauda, meanwhile, had now caught Tombe, the battle now promoted to one for 3rd, while Rosberg set about carving his way back up the field on his fresh tyres. By lap 34 he was 7th already, and had Warwick in front as Piquet swept past to lap the pair. Lauda had meanwhile got ahead of Tombe and was also motoring off in pursuit of Prost. And Watson had faded back to 5th and was also lapped by Piquet. Further back, Arnoux was struggling badly with tyre vibrations, so bad it had caused the Ferrari to shed its balance weights, and he was being caught by Chico Serra, going great guns in the surprisingly nippy plain white arrows. While Serra was hanging onto the back of the Ferrari, Piquet's pit crew were getting ready, and on lap 40 of 63 he came in with a huge lead, and one smooth stop later he was back out, still in the lead, still some 40 seconds ahead of Prost. If his car proved reliable, there didn't seem to be much anyone else could do about it. Not that Rosberg was going to let it lie at that, of course, and he continued his progress through the places as the Brazilian TV director watched the local hero circulate. Swiftly disposing of Tombe, Rosberg made his way past Prost, who was also fading with severe vibrations, and who'd also lost out to Lauda. So with just over 10 laps to go, it was now Piquet, Lauda, Rosberg, Tombe, Prost and Thieir. Rosberg got past Lauda to recover 2nd a few laps later, quite a remarkable comeback after his exciting stop. His new teammate Lafitte was also motoring, making it up past Thieir into the points, then past Prost as he dropped further back. And that was that. Piquet stormed home for the home win, with Rosberg 2nd and Lauda 3rd, Lafitte 4th, Tombe 5th and Thieir picking up the last point, only a 10th behind the Ferrari. The Arrows team could be happy with the day's work, with both cars coming home and Serra making his way ahead of Arnoux. This would hopefully help the sponsorship situation. Piquet and Rosberg had finished 1-2 last year, only for both drivers to be disqualified for running under weight, thanks to the water-cooled brakes. Rosberg then had a certain sense of déjà vu when he was once again disqualified from 2nd place, this time for getting a push start after his pit lane escapade. The stewards also disqualified De Angelis for changing his car type during the race, having broken the 93T and hopped in a spare 92, and just for good measure disqualified Baldi for his push start despite him not having finished anyway. Needless to say, all 3 teams appealed, and so once again the results of the Brazilian Grand Prix were provisional. In the event, this was much more of an open and shut case than last year's political headache, and the disqualifications were upheld except for Baldi's, given he'd derived no advantage. It wouldn't be much consolation, but at least he'd have DNF, not DSQ, on his record. For reasons best known to themselves, though, FISA elected not to promote the other drivers, and there were simply no points awarded for 2nd place. This presumably particularly annoyed Prost, who would otherwise have inherited a point. In the meantime, the teams all packed up and prepared to air freight everything over to California for the Long Beach Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time.